Hello everyone. This is my vulnerability assessment on James Trin's Windows RT 2012 server and Linux Ubuntu server. My name is Thomas Gagnon, and this presentation is for the class ISA4220. My professor is Andrew Green, and this assignment is due 11/30/2018. First, we will go over the methodology that I used to make this vulnerability assessment. To start, we first did a Zen map on James Trin systems, as you can see at the top right and the top left, well, top right and bottom right. And the top one is the Linux server, and the bottom one is the Windows server. As you can see, they both had all their services, but if you look at the top right Linux, you can see that SMTPS and Postgres, both of their ports are closed. Now I did a manual confirmation. It wasn't a firewall issue. The services are installed, but they are not configured correctly to listen in on the correct port. So while they are up, they're not accessible. So currently, it's not too much of an issue. It should be fixed, and it should have been fixed before he turned it in. But at this point, it's not much of a security issue if no one can access it. We also use Nessus to further analyze and do this vulnerability assessment for these two systems. We'll show more evidence later on the evidence page, but for now, that is my methodology. Now we'll go over the assessment findings. Overall, both machines, they weren't too bad overall. They both had their issues, but most of them were pretty straightforward and fixable. The main biggest problem that needs to be addressed is that updates are really needed. The Ubuntu server, the Ubuntu's operating system is out of date and it's no longer supported. This means that any exploit that's found in just the core operating system, it won't be fixed anymore. The developers don't support it, and anything anyone ever finds going forward is now a vulnerability that's just open to the public. This can result in the entire machine being compromised, and just all kinds of havoc can happen. Luckily, this is a pretty straightforward fix. Just update the operating system to the newest operating system. Right now, it's I'm not sure which. I think we're on 14.04 Ubuntu, but the newest one is 18.04, and that will be supported until April 2023. So that's the number one critical error that needs to be fixed. But luckily it's pretty easy. Another update that also needs to be done on the Ubuntu server is Apache. The Apache is also outdated. It's a couple versions behind. The vulnerability it's more of a medium vulnerability, and the reason it's not too bad is that it's most of the exploits are just a malicious user could crash Apache if they wanted to. So while it's still something that needs to be fixed, it's not too bad, but loss of uptime is a big deal. So those are for the updates. The next thing that needs to be done is both servers, Windows and Ubuntu, they both need SSL certificates. They are both self-signed, as in our assignment, no student was going to buy an official SSL security certificate for our servers. But it is possible to do, and that's what I would officially recommend if this was a real business sort of server. A self-signed server is very vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks. People can just pretend to be you. Other machines have trouble figuring out whether you're actually who you say you are. So going onto like an online website and buying an official SSL certificate, or just generating one, excuse me about that, would be the best option here. This is also pretty straightforward. It'll cost about maybe anywhere from 100 to a couple hundred, depending on how long you need it for, per server. Some services will also help you get that all set up for you, so That also will get rid of a majority of the medium issues regarding both of these servers. Something else that needs to be addressed is that certain ciphers in both Windows and Ubuntu need to be disabled. Specifically, the RC4 cipher. It is a medium strength cipher that if someone really wanted to, they could analyze and they could look at hundreds, or no, it's hundreds of millions of ciphertexts, and they can use it to figure out what the plain text is because it's not completely random, the ciphers. So if they look at hundreds of millions of ciphertext, they can figure out the plain text of the original message. So that's, if someone was dedicated enough, they could get into it. While it's not the most pressing matter, it also needs to be addressed. There are also other ciphers that are also of medium strength that are allowed from anonymous other people connecting. That needs to be disabled, so pretty much we need to make sure that only high strength and higher ciphers are allowed and used. But now we'll go over to the next slide where you can see exactly all the evidence and exactly what I was just talking about. Alright, so here you can see all the evidence that I've gathered that I just talked about in our last slide. Our top right picture up here is the Linux server, 192.168.2.66. Now as you can see, we have one critical vulnerability here, and that was the Unix operating system being outdated, as I said. This is obviously a big deal. It's the biggest vulnerability here out of both machines, but it's a relatively straightforward fix, as I said. Just update the machine and go to the newest version. Other than that, there's not too many vulnerabilities on both these machines. It's actually rather well done. Most of these fixes we couldn't actually fix ourselves by ourselves. I know my machine, I couldn't fix most of these. Like I couldn't fix the updated Unix system or the Apache updates. But even if you got rid of the updates, if you updated Unix and if you update Apache, you would effectively get rid of 5 vulnerabilities, 1 critical and 4 mediums on the Linux server. So you'd be left with only 3 mediums and 2 lows, which is not bad at all. So that's a pretty quick and easy fix to get the Linux server hardened even more. Other than that, we have obviously we have the ciphers that are also vulnerable, the medium ciphers, and that includes the low and 1 medium. The SSL certificates also include some. That's 1 low and 1 medium. And those are the major problems, especially with the Linux server. Other than that, we have informational vulnerabilities, which you can't really do much about. It's just, and they don't do anything harmful really, so they're really almost negligible on the priority list. If we look at our Windows server, it's got even less vulnerabilities. We only have 4 mediums and 1 low, but they all have to do with SSL. Pretty much just fix the SSL certificates and get rid of certain ciphers, and that is completely fixed. Then you just have informational things. If you look at our firewall is good enough for our uses, so that is plenty fine. And then next we'll go to the real-world consequences and applications of these vulnerabilities and fixes. So now I'm sure you're wondering, okay, so we have these vulnerabilities, what's the big deal? When I say critical, you may not know exactly how critical it is. That kind of critical vulnerability could be anything, and anyone can access it. If they just scan our system, they can see what kind of operating system we're running. And if a malicious user sees that we're running an outdated operating system that's no longer supported, they can look up any sort of exploits, any exploits that have been previously found, and they will work on us because there's been no patches. Like, they could find an exploit that just gives them complete control of our system if it's old enough and that bad enough. So that should be fixed ASAP. We don't want to lose anything. We could lose all our data, all our information, anything stored. We could lose everything from something just simple as not updating. So we should do that as soon as possible, so we don't have a ton of downtime from not being able to even access our systems. Second, updating Apache. Apache being able to be crashed by almost anyone. Most of the problems with not updating Apache had to do with it would crash Apache, or it would allow that service to get DOSed, which is a denial of service attack, which means they just throw so many users and pretty much like they mail us so much traffic that our systems can't handle it. So that obviously affects the real users, and they get frustrated and they don't want to use our servers, our systems, and so we lose revenue and we have more downtime. So just more people aren't using our stuff, and we have less productivity. Other than that, we have insecure information, and that has to do with our SSL certificates and our ciphers. Without official certificates, other people can pretend to be us and do a man-in-the-middle attack, and pretty much anything we send to a customer or a client or a employee, they would know about, and whatever they send to us, they would also know about. So we would really like to get that fixed. The ciphers, a dedicated individual could really just, if we had a document that we really need to be secured and no one to find out, even if we sent it in it's secured, encrypted with a medium strength cipher, while it wouldn't immediately be broken, a dedicated enough of individual or a group of individuals could scan enough ciphered text to turn that information to plain text. And so they would gain access to that information that we didn't want anyone to have access to. So that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. But those are the major real world applications and what could happen if the worst case scenario happened in each of these situations, each of these vulnerabilities being used. So next we'll go to the next slide for the final verdict. Alright, so what should we actually do? Well, one, we should get these vulnerabilities fixed as soon as possible. They are alarming. They're just we need to update our systems. Like, I don't know what else to say. They need to be updated, but they're really straightforward. While they're so big that they can't be ignored, they're also such easy and straightforward fixes that I don't know any reason for us not to do it. So we should get to doing that as soon as possible to minimize any sort of risk that we could take. And it's such an easy fix for such a big potential, like, giant vulnerability that we have. So let's update our systems. And we should do this very quickly because anyone can find it and anyone can exploit it if they want. After that, we can get going on our SSL certificates and keeping the ciphers safe, keep getting safer ciphers. After that, like, our systems are pretty hardened for our uses. It's pretty good. If there's any other questions, please leave a comment below. And thank you. Bye.